Colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, very welcome to this seminar. It really is a great honor for us here at Karolinska Institutet to have the President and the CEO of the Mayo Clinic, Professor John H. Noseworthy, here with us today. It is also an honor to have the County Commissioner of Finance, Mr. Torbjörn Rosdahl, here with us, as well as County Council Commissioner of Health, Philippa Reinfeldt. We're very happy that you're here. Just have to make one apology, and that is I really apologize for the weather. Neither the County Council nor Karolinska Institutet was able to do anything about that. Now, the Mayo Clinic is, as most of you probably are aware of, a not-for-profit healthcare system operating in several states in the US, dedicated to medical care, research, and education. And for us here at Karolinska Institutet, that sounds very familiar. And for you who has not visited the Mayo Clinic, it is located at Rochester, Minnesota. Now, for almost 20 years, there has been a close tie and collaboration between the Karolinska Institutet and the Mayo Clinic. The first contacts were made in the area of diabetes and nutrition, but now the scope has been extended. So last year in April, I visited together with the Vice President, John Hendrickson, and we were extremely impressed. We were so impressed by the way the Mayo Clinic has combined the healthcare and research to really integrate the healthcare and research. But what really impressed us the most was actually not that. What really impressed us was another thing, and I hope maybe, John, that you will maybe talk about that. That was the logistics. The fantastic logistics, how the patient came in, found their way, didn't have to wait, and had the charts exactly what would happen to them, and it was so well planned. And the reason for this extremely well planning was that you have quite a few engineers working with you. So that there is something we can copy, I think. Now, we also had a very important visit here in December last year. We had the pleasure of hosting around 25 colleagues of yours, and it was faculty and staff from the Mayo Clinic, and that visit ended with that we are now planning of expanding this collaboration to areas like regenerative medicine, bioinformatics, neurodegenerative diseases, and psychiatry. And we are really looking forward to plan those things more in detail. Now, let me introduce the County Commissioner of Finance, Mr. Torbjörn Rosdahl, to say some words before we start your lecture. So, Mr. Rosdahl, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As you heard, ladies and gentlemen and friends, my name is Torbjörn Rosdahl, and it's a great pleasure for me as Stockholm County Commissioner of Finance to extend a warm welcome to today's speaker, the famous Dr. Noseworthy from Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is a model that emulates not just for its outstanding medical research and education, but also for the clinic research it conducts and the organization of the healthcare it provides. The Mayo Clinic has managed to combine world-leading research with equally high-quality care in a way that allows its 55,000 employees to work towards the same goal, to improve the lives of over 1 million patients every year. This is highly admirable, and in the Stockholm area, we can learn a lot from you. We are also proud to develop our relationship with the Mayo Clinic. For the last 15 to 20 years, there have been close ties and collaborations between Karolinska Institutet and the Mayo Clinic. The research fields concerned are ones in which both Karolinska Institutet and the Mayo Clinic have each made considerable advances. To further deepen this partnership will most likely enable us to take a giant leap forward within the field of medicine, including healthcare, research, and education. It will also be exciting to collaborate on administrative and organizational issues with Mayo Clinic. This non-profit organization that incorporates a university with its 5 medical faculties along with hospitals around the United States. On behalf of the Stockholm County Council, I would like to welcome you, Dr. Noseworthy, to Stockholm, and I'm very much looking forward to hear you talk. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, not yet. Now, I will make an appropriate introduction of Dr. Noseworthy, and he has a long and outstanding CV. He received his MD degree from Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada. He completed his neurology training in Dalhousie University and the University of Western Ontario. Thereafter, he received a research fellowship at Harvard Medical School. He joined the Mayo Clinic in 1990, where he became professor in neurology. He has served as chair of the Mayo Clinic's Department of Neurology. He's been the medical director of the Department of Development, and he's been the vice chair of the Mayo Clinic Rochester Executive Board. He has very impressive continued to practice medicine and consult with patients. His specialty is in multiple sclerosis and clinical trials. He's a co-author of more than 150 high-ranked research papers, and among other prestigious tasks, he has served as editor-in-chief of Neurology, the official journal of the American Academy of Neurology. Clearly, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Noseworthy has had a major impact on the fantastic development of the Mayo Clinic, and now we are, and I'm looking around, we are all very excited to listen to his talk about healthcare in a new world, transformation through collaboration.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. President Wahlberg, Hendrickson, elected officials, dear colleagues, I bring you greetings from the Mayo Clinic, from my colleagues who know you, who know of your work and with whom you collaborate. It is a great personal honor for me to be here. I have always wanted to visit Karolinska Institute, one of the leading research institutes in the world. You know that, but we know it as well. I've had a fabulous day. I'm here with my wife, Pat, both from Minnesota. Pat's family is Danish. Most of the people in Minnesota are Norwegian or Swedish or pretend to be. So I feel at home. Today I've had the opportunity to visit with your scientists in cardiac disease, in regenerative medicine, in nanomedicine, and we've talked about all 3 aspects of what Mayo Clinic focuses on. Oh, I'm sorry, I must have pushed a button here. I did. This is the Mayo Clinic emblem, 3 shields, education, research, and practice, all integrated. So today we spoke about your graduate and postgraduate education programs, your discovery and translation research, and a little bit about the practice of medicine. We share a common culture, that in excellence, and we have complementary systems of education and research. We are quite new. We are only 147 years old. You are 202 years old, I think. But we've used those decades wisely to advance science and education. Today, we don't have very much time together, so I want to emphasize three key areas in my brief comments. Briefly tell you, whoops, I'm sorry. I shouldn't do that. A slight overview of Mayo Clinic and how we are changing to extend our reach beyond what we have traditionally been, a place where patients come from all over the world to share what we know more globally. That's a big change for Mayo Clinic. And then I will emphasize the commonalities of your culture and ours and how we can use those together in teamwork and collaboration to advance science and education. About 100 years ago, the older brother, Dr. Will Mayo, uttered a sentence, a complex sentence in two parts that is really the creed of Mayo Clinic. And it said as follows: the best interest of the patient is the only interest to be considered. And so at Mayo Clinic, every employee in every discussion across all of what we do always says the needs of the patient come first, and how do our discussions impact the needs of the patient. And that's very deep in our culture. The second half of this sentence from a graduation to the Rush Medical School in Chicago 100 years ago said, in order that the sick may have the benefit of advancing knowledge, union of forces is necessary. And that concept that none of us and none of our disciplines can ever possibly hope to understand all that is known about biomedical research and practice, that a union of forces, that teamwork, is essential. So in the Mayo Clinic DNA, as it is at Karolinska DNA, the concept of teamwork is paramount to what we do. As Mr. Rosdahl said, we have roughly 60,000 employees in 3 major centers in the United States. We see a little over 1 million people each year face to face. We see about 8,000 international patients from 130 countries, so quite a few travel to Mayo Clinic for our model of care. Education is critical to us as it is to you. We train 3,500 physicians, scientists, graduate students, and allied health professionals. And with our continuing medical education efforts, we train approximately 120,000 physicians each year. We talk about the key activity at Mayo Clinic is taking knowledge and bringing it to the bedside. We call that knowledge to delivery. At Karolinska, you talk about discovery to application, very same path. We feel that everything that's known or knowable from biomedical research and everything that's known about the individual patient should come together. That's a tall order. We're not there yet. Not every patient benefits from all that is known, focused on them, but that is our goal. Like you, we are a research institution. Perhaps we emphasize a little bit more the clinical and translational research. I believe you have a stronger basis, quite a bit stronger basis in basic science than we do, although we do have strong molecular medicine, immunology, genomics, and use that and use those tools to help us with our translational research. But as our two fine institutions come together, perhaps this can complement each other for the benefit of our patients. As President mentioned, Mayo is building global alliances. Typically, Mayo Clinic for more than 100 years has been what we call a destination medical center, where people travel from all over the world to come to see us if they have complex or unresolved medical issues, unknown medical issues, or simply are looking for hope in a situation that is deemed to be hopeless. Our goal going forward is to continue to advance as an outstanding destination for people who need to come to see us, but increasingly to share what we know globally. We call that Mayo Clinic Everywhere, if you will, using technology to take Mayo-vetted knowledge and bring that in a meaningful way. Our goal in the next 10 years is to do that with 200 million people across the globe. We see no reason why we can't take our experience and put that in the hands of people and healthcare providers globally. That's a big vision for Mayo. It meets our business needs, but more importantly, it meets our humanitarian needs to share what we know, which we believe is the right thing to do. In doing this, we are building alliances, one of which we've heard about today with Karolinska, other alliances both in business and in practice in India and China and across North America. 80 years ago, the older Mayo brother had another quote that we'd like to refer to at home. It says, "I look through a half-open door into the future, full of interest, intriguing beyond my power to describe." That was said 80 years ago before penicillin was in wide use. The Mayo brothers believed that what they were doing could eventually be applied more globally. This is our interest, as I mentioned. Now, healthcare in North America is undergoing enormous changes. Probably before this week is out, the Supreme Court of the United States will decide whether President Obama's health care bill is constitutional or not, and whether that work will go forward fully, partially, or not at all. Similarly, as we discussed with your lead administrators and scientists today, healthcare is undergoing major changes in terms of consolidating centers of excellence and centers of payment. We have between 3,500 and 5,000 insurance companies in the United States. Within 5 years, there will probably be 5. We have hundreds of hospital systems in the United States. We believe that that number will get very much smaller. And as that happens, one has to decide how are we going to position ourselves to be successful and to broaden our reach. And I will briefly describe that strategy in a moment. As you all know, all great institutions, all great organizations need to change if they are to be successful. This is what we call the strategic inflection point of Mayo Clinic. We talk about this internally. It's similar to any business. It's perhaps similar to Karolinska. We have a very mature business model that has been growing decade by decade by decade in reputation, in reach, in success, in finance, in growth, etc. But because of forces that are beyond our control, this success curve, this maturation curve, is at risk for turning the wrong way. In the United States, payment, we have an unsustainable healthcare system, and you've heard about this. We spend 16, 17, 18% of our GDP on healthcare, and our outcomes are no better, and in some areas not as good as they are in Sweden. In many areas, not as good as Sweden. You spend a lot of your GDP on healthcare, but not even half as much as we do. And consequently, the government is running out of money. and increasingly the business model, that is to say, pay the doctor, pay the hospital for the work that they do, we call that fee for service. That is disappearing. And that is putting this entire business model at risk if we don't anticipate and stay ahead of that curve. So, over the last 5 years, we've been developing a transformational business model in which we are investing, but yet have not seen any payback, and it may take 5 to 10 years for that to happen, and I will briefly mention that. We believe that this traditional destination come to Mayo Clinic model, as well as the transformational model of Mayo Clinic sharing what we know with our partners around the world, will supplement each other and allow us to continue to be successful. The details don't matter to you, and I fully appreciate that. If you look at the mature model, each of these little circles, if you will, beads on a necklace, represent investments of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in our existing systems. We don't have as many cranes as you do, but we are investing heavily in our hospitals, in our technology, in our research and education activities to continue to fuel Mayo Clinic as a destination medical center. But the external pressures, the aging of the population, the increasing number of aged persons in North America who have multiple complex illnesses, and the fact that we can no longer be paid the way we've been paid forever, puts a lot of pressure on our business model. Each of these little beads on this necklace represent investments for that transformational change that I briefly mentioned. And I'll show you a couple of these because they're relevant to Karolinska. We, like you, believe that investing heavily in our understanding of aging and neurodegenerative diseases and cancer as two particular things are critical to the success to improve the outcomes of our patients and also provide care at lower cost. We have something called the Mayo Clinic Care Network, which your president and I were talking about earlier. And that is a plan that we will be creating affiliations with 20 to 50 large American healthcare organizations and perhaps 5 to 10 international organizations that, like us, are focused on excellence, quality, safety, affordable, outstanding care through a relationship with Mayo where they remain independent, and yet our knowledge, our systems, our business models, the way we manage care can help them provide higher quality care locally. And they will remain connected with us using mobile technologies and all these things that are being developed for us to help them provide better care locally. And yet Mayo Clinic will be there as a backup with our team-based medicine or our technologies for those who can benefit. This is called the Mayo Clinic Care Network. It's a hedge against that consolidated strategy that I mentioned and allows outstanding institutions to remain independent and yet perhaps partner with us to do better. We have something called the direct-to-consumer platform or the affiliate patient network, where Mayo Clinic is developing a series of products that we believe will be of interest to people everywhere. We believe that over the next 10 years, Mayo Clinic can provide information that will be tailored or could be tailored for individuals, citizens of the world, who share with us their demographics, their social habits, their medical records, their medications, their family history, their genome, their tumor genome, whatever it is, to allow us to tailor their care wherever they live in the world as a backup or as to supplement their care provision by their local physicians and hospitals. These are two big ideas that we are working on. Perhaps more immediately applicable to Karolinska is we have made significant investments in 3 centers. The Center for Individualized Medicine, focusing, of course, on genomics. The Center for Regenerative Medicine and you know all about that because you are world leaders in that area, and something called the Center for the Science of Healthcare Delivery. How do we re-engineer the delivery of healthcare for especially the most important illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, heart failure, et cetera, to allow patients to standing high-quality care at lower cost using systems engineering and other techniques. These three centers are different from our traditional research centers at Mayo Clinic, which are run by scientists to solve scientific problems. In a sense, they're a little bit more like small startup companies. They report both to our Dean for Research, where are you, Martin? Over there, our Dean of Research and our Dean of the Practice. And so they have a budget, and if you will, it's a little bit more like R&D, like research and development. Produce products and services that will take advantage of genomic technology to advance diagnostics, if you will. Same in regenerative medicine. How can we best re-engineer organogenesis, neoorganogenesis, to relieve the organ transplantation burden that we have in the country? So it's not simply research for research's sake, but how do we bring that right into the practice? And this is where we are seeing tremendous alignment with your physicians and scientists at Karolinska, these three centers. And by doing this, by taking what Mayo Clinic knows and creating a network in our country, and hopefully one day a network internationally, we will create a new future state for how Mayo Clinic influences healthcare in the world and how patients benefit. Similarly, direct to consumers, same thing. And these three centers, focusing on the diseases I mentioned, create the products and services to take advantage of biotechnology, but finding it at an affordable way to help patients live healthier lives. Now, when you try to make a change to an organization that has been so successful, you best be careful, and you know this, because you don't want to mess with it. It has been successful for 100 years, or in your situation, 200 years. So what do? You focus on the principles that have been successful for your organization, and build off those, and build off your people. So I'm going to talk about three key principles that we are focusing on going forward. The first, as I mentioned, was the needs of the patient. The second, and we had a great seminar this morning or this afternoon on your innovation activities, and then collaboration. So in our Center for Individualized Medicine, we, like Karolinska, are taking everything that we know and others are finding and focusing that on individual patients. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We're using whole genome sequencing obviously, to treat patients with cancer. And one example is breast cancer, where we have a study that's about to launch called the Beauty Study. And this is for women who are at high risk of recurrent cancers. And in that study, we're doing whole genome sequencing on the patients and creating what are called mouse avatars. This is new for me. I'm a neurologist. I don't know much about avatars. But they take these immune restricted mice. We implant the tumor before surgery and after chemotherapy as a pure culture of the epithelial cell tumor, and then use that to study new ways of treating the patient based on the patient's individual genomics and the genomics of their tumor. I had to throw this in. We were lucky to win, not lucky, we were fortunate to win the Nobel Prize in 1950. We are overdue for another one. You have 5, we have 1. But we are very proud of the Nobel Prize for cortisone. We've done a lot of work in developing the artificial hip, but now we are looking at how can we delay aging. And we have something called the Aging Center, the Kogod Aging Center. And perhaps your scientists have heard about this. The work by Jim Kirkland and Jan van Dersen was highlighted by Nature and Science last year with one of the top 10 advances in the field of all of science, not just biomedical science, in which they found that by removing senescent cells from a model of premature aging in mice, they could delay significantly the development of cataracts, muscle weakness, and other signs of aging. And so through this technology of identifying cells as they age and literally removing them from the tissue, there's an opportunity for delaying aging. I think that's a really good idea. Our Aging Center is also working on a more practical level of how can we use technology to monitor elderly subjects in an apartment complex and treat their heart failure, their wobbly gait so they don't fall, and understand what interventions can we do to keep them from hospital. It's called the Healthy Aging and Independent Living Study. So we're focusing on aging. Neurodegenerative diseases, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, again, you are world leaders in this area. In the area of MS, multiple sclerosis, my area of work, although not on the science side, more on the clinical research side. Two of our scientists are doing, we think, groundbreaking work. One has been going on now for a decade or so, trying to understand how to induce remyelination, repair, in patients with MS, the work of Dr. Moses Rodriguez, and your neuroscientists know about that. And most recently in the New England Journal, the report from Dr. Lucanetti on where does the inflammation begin in MS, perhaps not in the deep white matter, but perhaps in the cortex. Again, new ideas to advance the field. In the area of Parkinson's disease, much like your scientists, we're trying to understand the core of that and intervene earlier, perhaps to help our patients. This is Dr. Shri Nair, who together with John Warren and now Dr. Zerath on your faculty have been at the very cutting edge of diabetes and metabolism research. This is the foundation of the work between Karolinska and Mayo Clinic. Their work now is on metabolic and epigenetic adaptation to diet, to exercise, to stress and surgery. They're looking at the mechanisms of insulin resistance and developing new markers to monitor the advances in the disease and the advances in therapy. And of course, diabetes is a terrible problem in North America. I learned today that we're 11 years more obese than you are in the United States. So we are ahead of you in creating our diabetes epidemic, but you are certainly along that same path. Second major principle is that of innovation. There's a slide there on the heart-lung machine, the bypass machine. Mayo Clinic was the leader in developing this in the early open heart surgeries. Our scientists and your scientists are collaborating actively on stem cell research for cardiac disease. We heard from Professor Granemo this morning about the multinational clinical trial that he and others on your campus in your institution are leading to replace damaged myocardial tissue with stem cell tissue, especially in patients who have advanced heart failure requiring assisted devices. In the world of neo-organogenesis, I learned about Dr. Macchiarini's work with a number of you on growing tracheas and one day growing esophagus and larynx for patients who require replacement of these critical organs. In 1941, you may know this, but Mayo Clinic developed the G-suit, the high-altitude pressure suit, which helped to turn the air war in favor of the Allies. It is said that when the body of an Allied airman was brought to the High Council of the Nazis, and they said that they realized he was wearing an anti-pressure suit, General, I don't have the right term, Messerschmitt said the war is lost. We cannot win. If they have a high-altitude pressure suit, their pilots will not black out. Our pilots are blacking out. The war is over. So we have a history of innovation at Mayo Clinic. And with you, we are interested in this field of nanoscience, nanotechnology, and cancer genetics. And I saw a demonstration of your work in this area just a few minutes ago. And this applies to all diseases. And I'm very proud of the work that you are doing there, Dr. Fidel, Dr. Lohr, Dr. Nystrom, Dr. Wicklund, and others whose names I will I should mention. But the work in nanotechnology will help us with currently untreatable cancers and incompletely understood infectious diseases, just to mention a couple. I mentioned the science of healthcare delivery. This was new to me a few years ago. What is the science of healthcare delivery? I briefly mentioned that in my introduction. Understanding everything that's at play in taking what we know and delivering healthcare. In the United States, and I suspect it's possibly true in Sweden as well, there is much variability in how medicine is practiced. And we are working very hard at re-engineering how we practice medicine to take out all the waste and improve the delivery so that healthcare is safer. And I just turned off the slides. Don't know how I did that. We don't want to have mistakes like that in the operating room. So healthcare is safer, and so that patients get all the care they need and nothing else. And that is a big deal. And so we are, as I mentioned, we're working with human factors engineers to improve how we deliver that healthcare. This represents, of course, a handwritten note. And many of you know that 105 years ago, Mayo Clinic came up with a single medical record. And that medical record went with the patient wherever that patient went, the unified medical record. That gave us a 100-year jump on North American medicine because the entire patient's medical experience was kept in that single paper record. Prior to that, in our country, every doctor had their own records. And it was very difficult to know what care the patient needed. At Mayo Clinic for 100 years, we've had that. But the world is catching up to us. And now, we are, like you, using natural language processing to extract information from the medical record to deal with this problem of interoperability between all the many data systems that are out there. I spoke to a number of your folks today, and you have the same problem. Multiple data sources, all written with different codes, all on different platforms, and how do we best take that information and bring it together so the needs of the patient are met and supported by technology. Last week, Mayo Clinic received $60 million in research money from the government to do just that, to take technology and improve how we provide care in the safest possible way, as quickly as possible, to Medicare and Medicaid patients, that is to say elderly and patients who are impoverished in our critical care units to provide them with safer care. This collaboration will continue to grow between our organizations. There is much we can do together. I believe more than we can do separately. At the end of September, Karolinska has a Cancer Research Network retreat here. Scientists from Mayo Clinic will attend. The next week, we have an individualized medicine conference in Mayo Clinic, and scientists and physicians from Karolinska, University of Illinois, Arizona State University, and other groups with whom we work will come to Mayo Clinic. This slide shows how similar our organizations are. If you pair up what you think is important and what we think is important, it's virtually the same. Knowledge to delivery, discovery to applications. Science of healthcare delivery, sustainable innovation. With collaboration, integration, improving healthcare, a global scope, entrepreneurship, and you are doing fabulous work in this important area. And simulation education, we didn't talk about that yet today. We have much to do together. We share a common culture centered around the patient, centered around science, centered around excellence. This impact will outlive all of us. It is very fortunate for Mayo Clinic to associate with the world-famous Karolinska. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this brilliant lecture, and I think it really inspires us, doesn't it, to listen to how much we can do together for the future. I feel very inspired, and now as a little memory from this lecture, this is a little gift from us to you.
Thank you.
And the only thing I can say is don't drop it. So I'm not sure I should give it to you or maybe to your wife.
Thank you, Harry, very much, and thank you all so very much. Thank you very much.
And we certainly have time for questions and the discussion, and I would like to ask our Dean of Research, Martin Ingvar, to moderate the discussion. There you go.
Hello, I'm here. Please stand here in the light, otherwise people can't see you. I'm leaving, the floor is open for questions and answers, and I'm sure that we have a lot to ask about. Okay, Harriet, you go first.
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. Now, John, you talked about a new business model which is very intriguing because it really had a lot of different components. And many of them similar to things we are discussing here, some of them new to us. And what you really included in this new business model is a transformational change. And one thing you actually didn't talk so much about, and I was wondering what that actually meant, and that was direct-to-consumer platforms.
Sure.
That sounds as something which would be very, very important for the clinic.
Thank you very much. So in the United States, although the citizens of the U.S. don't know it yet, in 2 years or so, they will be responsible for much more of their health care costs personally. In our country, most people have no idea what health care costs, and they are going to find out, because the current health care bill and where we stand with our economy suggests that individuals would be responsible for much more of what we call out-of-pocket expense. And so one of the things we are creating are products and services for the individual patient to keep them well, and as I mentioned, to focus what's knowable about their health and dialing that in as much as possible for each individual consumer. Now, that will take 10 years to build that, essentially. But currently, for instance, we have a number of wellness offerings, and people are very interested in this. And then you tell them, well, this wouldn't cost $175, this wellness. Oh, I'm not going to pay for that. My insurance company should pay for that. Well, I'm sorry, but the insurance companies aren't going to pay for that, if you will. So essentially, it's a whole strategy of direct-to-consumer products that we hope will keep them well, help us reduce their likelihood of developing disease, if you will, and ultimately diagnose their problems earlier. And this is a very broad-reaching series of products we're developing. For the partners, if you will, in the care network, there is similarly a business model for those practices that wish to remain independent but would like to be part of the Mayo Clinic care network. And they look at that and say, okay, what will that cost me as an organization to be part of Mayo Clinic Care Network and to take Mayo vetted knowledge and bring it into my practice? And that's basically a membership fee, an opportunity to see if that reaches the level of interest for those groups.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. You really illustrated the similarities between our organizations, and particularly then the rather unique structures that we have in being a medical university, freestanding from other areas. At the same time, you have lifted forward the importance of system engineers to really get to grips with healthcare delivery and understanding this, the importance of technology to be able to answer the solutions. Can we afford to survive as independent medical universities in the future? Because there's so many other areas that we need to address these problems?
Well, increasingly, I'll just talk about the US. I can't speak about Europe, the Nordic countries. But in the US, there's no more money for healthcare, and there will be no more money for healthcare. And so the system, the healthcare, I believe the healthcare systems in the US are going to have to justify the costs of their care. And so we believe our most important practice strategy is to reduce the cost of our care while improving the value. So essentially cutting out all the waste, being more efficient. And if we have new technologies that help with diagnosis or therapeutics, something has to give. We can't simply add another expensive diagnostic or another expensive imaging study. Something else has to go. And so it'll be evidence-based, value-creating healthcare. Most of the cost in healthcare in the United States is people and the institutions. One of our patients said to me, Mayo Clinic is not patient-centered. Well, that was a slap in the face, because that's what we try to do. And I said, why is that? And they said, if you were patient-centered, you would be open in the evenings. You'd be open on Saturdays and Sundays. You'd be available to me 24/7. Why couldn't I do my neurological consultation on Sunday afternoon? Well, of course, they're absolutely right. Why would we close our operating rooms all weekend long? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And our staff goes, uh-oh. That's what our grandson says, uh-oh. That's his favorite phrase. He's 15 months old, but Mayo Clinic, they say, uh-oh. That means I'm going to have to work nights and weekends. Well, yes, but it's shared burden. Why? Because it's the needs of the patient. So you find a way to keep your technologies open in the evenings, and then your costs go down. As we build more wings, more hospitals, more operating rooms, I'm looking at our elected officials here, what we say to our staff when they say, are you going to have extended hours and we work in the evenings and on Saturday mornings? We say, well, let's start with working from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoons, Monday to Friday. Because in some healthcare systems, you look and the operating room is closed at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Why? Well, we don't have any more surgeries to do today, and that lies empty. Well, that's a scheduling problem. That's an engineering problem, to get at your question, Jan. So there's much we can do with engineering how healthcare is delivered. That's the Center of Science, Healthcare, Engineering. In it, before we start opening nights and weekends, before we create, so again, I'll look to you. Our heart surgeons, the giants of medicine, I mean, they are. These are remarkable people that do heroic work. We want 3 more operating rooms. And we said, uh-oh, I'm just making enemies with all of you. But we said, why don't you use your operating rooms better? We know how to schedule. We've always scheduled this way. The engineers study and say, wait a minute, there's all kinds of waste in this system. The giants of heart surgery at Mayo Clinic, working with engineers, solved that puzzle. With the same number of operating rooms, they were able to do 20% more surgery. We said, good. Now you can have more operating rooms because you can do more surgery. So we do not invest any of our money in a process that has not yet been improved with engineering. And so that's what has to happen. In American medicine, there are very few engineers in healthcare. There are a few centers that take that to their advantage. We have 100 years of engineers embedded at Mayo, and yet we need more work there. But I think that's where the savings is going to come. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you very much for a very good talk. I'd like to build on the previous question a bit. You talked about your science of healthcare delivery and about reducing variability of how medicine is practiced. Could you tell us a little bit about what success factors you see in order to be able to do that?
It's not easy. It's all dependent on good data. And what we have found is cultural change is very difficult in an organization, even one like Mayo Clinic, where all the doctors are salaried, and we have a common culture. To change how we work has been very difficult. But what we essentially said would be, we need to eliminate practice variability, have a single practice of medicine, standardizing on what is known, because a great deal is known, and use that as a platform for innovation. Embed that in what we call our quality academy. We have a series of, if you will, black belts who have trained to reduce that. Publish those results. We have about one quality paper per week, several hundred papers in the last 5 years on Mayo's quality initiatives to reduce the variability. What we found is the investment, the return on investment for our quality initiative is 5 to 1. For every dollar we invest in standardization of care, we have a return of 5-fold in avoided costs to the patients because of infections, because of wrong treatments, readmission to the hospital, falls, all those kinds of things. We've used simulation to train. One example, inserting intravenous catheters into the large vessels of the neck or under the clavicle and so on. Our surgeons have done that forever. Our trainees have done that forever. We said, no, if you're going to do that, you must matriculate through simulation in how you do this in the safest way, and then you can go out and do that. So everyone who was responsible for doing that had to go through the simulation experience, be matriculated, and our infection rate fell by 80%. Just amazing through that one simulation, and so on and so on and so on, hundreds of these initiatives. Now, what we found, I'll just take the surgeons again for an example. The surgeons, I love the surgeons, but they are so strong. And they said, no, we know what we're doing. But when they are part of studying it and see a better way, like that, they change. As soon as they see the data, they change. But it has to be through data. It's been very effective. 5 to 1 investment, again, when you're looking at healthcare dollars, so expensive. You can do so much through reducing error rate and so on, and that's been a big deal at Mayo Clinic. It's true everywhere, probably here as well, but I find that very exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great lecture. At the Karolinska, I think we're particularly thrilled with how you integrate. You integrate with, now today we've learned you integrate engineering, but we also knew you're integrating healthcare with research and education in a very tight manner. And we want to learn from that, of course. But when you look, you mentioned this global program, you're looking out for partners, and we're fortunate to be one, and that's fantastic. What other partners could you identify? Have you seen any other centers that operate in a similar manner, or where you're thinking about in Europe or elsewhere?
Well, I have to keep my stories of the international to myself, I'm afraid, because some of that is proprietary at the moment. In North America, though, we look for partners who complement what we do. So, for instance, we need additional strength in bioinformatics. You are recruiting a lot of expertise in that area. Arizona State University, the University of Illinois are very strong in that area. So again, we look for complementary areas. I heard a number of your scientists say today, we don't do this, but they do, and so we work with them. It's the same basic principles. I have to say, this sounds arrogant, I don't mean that, but I have to say, I don't think anyone in US does better than we do in terms of patient-centered teamwork care. I wish that weren't the case. We go around looking for lessons. We can learn some lessons from others, and some are very good in other areas. We believe our system of teams working together around the patient seems to be an advantage to what other North American groups have.
Yes, thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. In order to run such an incredible organization, management is, of course, a very important part. And I wonder, you talked about value interesting issues that you work with. But I would wonder, do you have any special program when you talk about management? And
Yes.
do you have any
you.
kind of research regarding management within your organization?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for that. I think one of the secrets of the success, two of the secrets of the success of Mayo Clinic, one is the engineers, having them integrated in our systems and procedures and facilities and everything we do. I've talked about that. The other is, how could a nearly $9 billion not-for-profit organization as complex as healthcare be run by a neurologist? Come on. The Mayo's success, I think, is because every physician leader in every major part of the organization is paired with an administrative leader. And I have not seen that as universally done in other major universities. Now, there may be great examples of that. But every physician leader has an administrator who understands systems, finance, efficiencies, and how it gets done. In our culture of 4,000 physicians and 3,500 physician scientist trainees, it works best to have a physician leader or a series of physician leaders because our doctors are more likely to follow if we say this is good for the patient, this research and education is good for the patient, as opposed to following an administrator. Because they see administrator, oh, he or she is just trying to save costs. But immediately next to every physician is an administrator who knows how to make that happen. That's our secret, I think.
No outstanding question. Are we on time? We're just, well, you're very well behaved. You stopped the questions right on time. And I think we should thank you very much for this. And I think we should end with a big hand and say thank you for a most enlightening lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.